And we are back with our first debate. This is a long time coming. You guys really like the debates, and I think we do this pretty well. Well, I think that we do.
Right. And we haven't done it in a while just because of all the crap that's been going on.
With Dark Side of the Ring and blah, blah, blah. So, let me at least lay down the groundwork. We are going to each have 10 minutes to talk about our case of the question. And then the next part, we will have an open discussion based on the information that we had, and we'll just go from there. And then if you guys want to chime in on social media, we're more than happy to see those.
But first, what is the question?
The question is, was hardcore wrestling a good thing for the professional wrestling industry? I believe it was. You do not believe so. Let's at least have the consensus that some of it was a little too hardcore.
Right.
And obviously, we were not aware of the power of CTE at the time. So.
But let's begin, and I will begin my part where I say that that hardcore wrestling was not and is still not good for the professional wrestling industry as a whole.
Right. And ready?
Yep.
Go.
All right. So, yes, I'm under the firm belief that professional wrestling was not good then and is not good now. And look, I understand that, in the 90s it was cool to be grunge. That there was a point in time when hardcore wrestling was popular. And there certainly continues to be a niche for it. But the problem is when you bring it into the mainstream, when you bring it into the WWF, WCW, they all of a sudden were no longer the trendsetters that they used to be. They became trend followers. And I think that hardcore wrestling set a precedent in the industry. First off, for the actual promotions themselves, I think it signaled their departure from actually being trendsetters and just following or bucking the trend and figuring out what's popular. I think that a lot of the times they had lost some of their luster, some of the quality, not just of the matches, but of the storylines. I believe that storylines become muddied when there's too much weaponry involved. I think that the quality of a storyline becomes lessened when a weapon or something like that is involved. And certainly it had its day, but it is not its day today. And the other thing that I noticed too is that it sets a precedent for a lot of fans who have certain expectations of things happening, and then they become disappointed when things do not happen. Wrestling is an art, and yes, hardcore wrestling can be a piece of it, but it's not a very safe piece of it, and in my opinion, it's just a cop-out piece of art. It's like having a new character come into a storyline and causing chaos. When you introduce a chair to the situation, it can cause chaos. But when you and certainly there are times when it's within good conscious to do it, but when you look at the storylines today that do involve weapons, a lot of the superstars involved are superstars either from the Attitude Era or from the early part of Ruthless Aggression. It's not something that is readily introduced with this new way of looking at professional wrestling as a whole. And so I don't believe that hardcore wrestling was good for the industry because of the fact that weapons, in my opinion, do not advance the storyline as much as the wrestlers. A wrestling storyline can go forward without weapons involved. And I think that utilizing weapons just cheapens it. Now, how has pro wrestling hardcore pro wrestling affected the fan? Pro wrestling fans come in, of course, all different shapes and sizes. But serious wrestling fans, I believe, don't like the use of weapons, or maybe those of us who are more scholarly don't like the use of weapons because of the cheapness that it produces. You never see a hardcore match produce a 5-star match. The other thing, too, is that with all the knowledge that we now have, hardcore wrestling, I believe, should have died off the minute that we are discovering more about the effects of CTE and all that kind of stuff. But there seems to be this bloodlust that people have, and I don't believe that... I don't believe that people who like hardcore wrestling are developmentally as mature as those who are serious fans of the craft. And so, I do believe, like I said, I know that there's a place for it. There was a place for it in the 90s. The problem is that the product has persisted. And the reason is because professional wrestling, the professional wrestling industry does not know how to move past it. And I think that that ship has sailed. I don't know if there's a way that we can move past it. I think that there might come a time in the future where weapons do fall out of style. And I think that as these Attitude Era superstars start to retire or move away from the ring, I think we'll see more of that becoming a thing. And the other thing that I see as well is I think that the professional wrestling industry as a whole is going to change, because I don't see like educated adults calling for tables. I mean, that just is unfathomable to me. Is that we get all of these people who are so bloodlust that they have to have like these people put their bodies on the line for shock value or whatever. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I believe that there are places where utilizing outside objects is appropriate, but I don't think it should be used as much as some people would like it to be used. And I'm glad that professional wrestling is moving forward in a way that still does incorporate some sort of weapons, but it was still to the detriment of the industry as a whole. And I think that too, the biggest effect comes from the perception of people on the outside to what they see. So if you're not a professional wrestling fan and you only hear about it occasionally, the only reason you will hear about it is because something bad happened, or we see the results of certain scans and concussions and this and that and the other thing. And a lot of that has to do with the weapon use, especially with the older wrestlers. And the problems that it produces aren't going to go away. But I think that ultimately utilizing weapons cheapened the product in the eyes of those who are not fans of the product. And I think that if professional wrestling wants to be respected, I think that not having weapons be involved is going to be the best way for us to move forward. And so I believe that there should be some sort of protocol in place where weapons are now only being used in certain situations to advance certain storylines, being used very sparingly. We just can't have like the random tables match anymore. It is very dangerous, and it can cause a lot of damage. I mean, normal professional wrestling matches cause a lot of damage.
2 minutes.
Okay, so professional wrestling matches cause a lot of damage, and we don't need to cheapen the product anymore by having some sort of stupid weapon becoming involved. So, I don't know how many people take my side. Like I said, I do think that weapons in professional wrestling had its day, and that day is now gone. That day is past. And we are still dealing with the repercussions of that, not only for the companies, but also in the eyes of the fans and in the eyes of those who are not fans. And that's all I have.
Okay. So about a minute and 13 seconds left on that. Obviously, you didn't have to use all of that time. Right. So let me at least do my case where I do believe that not only was it good for the industry as a whole, but there is still a place for it today for hardcore wrestling. Now, I'm not saying that every match has to be hardcore. That's not what I'm saying. And I am fully aware that CTE is a very, very prevalent thing, especially in wrestlers where statistically wrestlers have the worst CTE of any sport ever. There's less in MMA and they actually hit each other in the face. But when I see this, and going back to the 90s, it was grunge. And wrestling at the time was not in a place that was good. It was in a very dangerous thing where I think hardcore wrestling saved the industry. The numbers don't lie. Before, they had 2.9s in Nielsen ratings, which was the television thing at the time. But once they started to implement more of that danger factor, the ratings skyrocketed to where you had an 8.5 and a 7.2 Nielsen rating. That's insane. Those are numbers that we have not seen other than like fringe season finales or like a big moment in the thing, and this was happening on a week-to-week basis. Also, I believe that the implementation of hardcore wrestling really brought out this whole storyline dynamic that made it more serious, where instead of hoity-toity, whatever, you get stuff that people don't like to talk about. It's the counterculture. Let's add religion. Let's add, in-depth stories where there's a lot of nuances, and I believe that the pushing of the envelope of hardcore wrestling really brought out that line of thinking overall. I think WWE is an example of how you can do weapons matches right. Because, well, number one, they're not like hitting each other over the head with chairs anymore. That's outright banned to any promotion that's worth its weight in spit. But they hit each other in the back. They put each other through ladders. There's still enough of a hardcore thing where you still get it. ECW. ECW, back in the 90s, was a trend setter for hardcore wrestling because they promoted it in this way where it was the counterculture to the counterculture. It really spearheaded, honestly, a lot of that grungy-esque stuff that saved the WWE, that saved WCW. They did not have this stuff. Ted Turner bought WCW because it was available, it was near his fucking house, and he hated Vince McMahon. That's the only reason. And I don't think WWE, WCW would be the same, if not even existing to this time without ECW, without the edgier storylines that hardcore wrestling brought out. Because that's just what it was. You push the envelope in one, you push the envelope in others. Plays like Hamlet, they push the envelope. They use certain props to convey the message. And I think if done right, there's still a place for hardcore wrestling in the industry as a whole. I'm not obviously condoning people using weed whackers or chair shots to the head anymore. That's going over the top, but there's a way to do it. To blow off a big rivalry. To where this rivalry is so intense that they're getting personal. Where the only way that they can solve it is with a match where rules are thrown out the window. And people respond to that well if used correctly. I'm going to go back to this one because this was probably one of the most hardcore matches that we have seen in a while. Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, SmackDown Women's Champion in a last woman standing match at WWE Evolution. It was compelling. It was structured well. They brutalized each other, and you knew, at least to a point, that they were safe. And it was one of the best matches that WWE produced in the last decade and a half, because I think with the intensity of that hardcore style, it really helped convey the message that these two hated each other. CTE is one of those things where, well, number one, I'm not going to condone you hitting each other over the head with whatever, but there are people who have survived it, who have had concussion city all the time, who have not done what people with CTE have done. I think it's based on the person. Mick Foley, who really pushed the envelope and really was one of the godfathers of hardcore wrestling, wrote, 5 or 6 best-selling books in the New York Times? That's insane. And he had more concussions than I think I could even count. How he's still alive and able to do this is beyond me. I don't know how he did it. Tommy Dreamer has such a great mind for the business, but his reputation and even his promotion now is House of Hardcore. He built his legacy on it. People build their legacy around this because it was something different. I have 3 minutes. And Tommy Dreamer has even come out and said, yeah, maybe don't hit each other over the head with a chair. It's probably not the best of ideas, but there's a way to do it. And, we say that it's the art of professional wrestling, and I agree. Wrestling is an art, but hardcore wrestling is a style of art different from the others. And I gave this analogy to Peanut Gallery, and I still think it holds true to this day, that you need to look at professional wrestling as fine art. You have different eras that really convey a different message. And I think hardcore wrestling does this well. And there's still a market for it. Hardcore wrestling is going to be there. If there is a vacuum in a certain subsect culture, somebody's going to make it. Why not do it safely, at least to an extent? Wrestling is not ballet. You're gonna get hurt. This is a physical art form. And hardcore wrestling is another one of those art forms. And I think it should not only be studied, it should be, and to a point, respected, because it saved something that a lot of people care about, but it should continue. It should continue in ways that we learn more now. And the mainstream portion of this style saved the industry as a whole. And wrestling ebbs and flows. We might say 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that hardcore wrestling might become mainstream again. Why not make it safe to where when it does become mainstream again, you're good? No wrestling fan worth his weight in spit is going to condone a company of any kind allowing headshots anymore. It's just not going to happen. Or using a weed whacker. And yes, that's kind of when things go viral. But it's up to the wrestling fans to really educate people on the art form of it. And say, if you want to watch this, there is a way to watch it. There are companies that do it right. Or at least there are companies that do it in a way that is not insulting to the intelligence. Because using a weed whacker to a guy's chest for the sake of whatever is not hardcore wrestling. That's just a slaughter. Hardcore wrestling is Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair. Hardcore wrestling is using complex, edgy storylines to convey your message, where it's so heated that you do that. And that's why I think, overall, as an arch, hardcore wrestling was good for the industry.
All right, so At this point in time, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to do about a 10-minute open forum.
Yep.
And then that will be the end of the show, and we'll talk about next week.
Yeah. And we are back, so I'm going to start the timer again. We're going to do an exact 10 minutes.
No. Let's not do it. Let's not do it with the timer. Let's just let's just wait until the recording gets up to about 10 minutes or so and get our points across.
No, that's fine. All right. I will let you start out with any kind of counter argument that you have based on it, and go.
I mean, I think that both of us are in agreement that at the time, hardcore wrestling was something different in the industry. And I think both of us agree that now hardcore wrestling does have a place, and it's not in the mainstream anymore. But, and I think both of us agree that those who still want the blood and guts are not going to get it.
No, not necessarily. You can get blood anywhere. If you want a bloody match, if you just want to see a bar fight, go down to a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right, but they're not like, I mean, they could call themselves wrestling fans, but they don't appreciate the art.
Well, once again, what do you constitute as art? Because basically what you're saying is that modern art has no place in the world of fine art. Like expressionism, neo-expressionism, and stuff is the only way to go.
But you're comparing art to
there are art forms.
It's just.
Well, do you think maybe conveying it as like different play styles would be better? Because I could do that.
Yeah,
too.
Maybe because different art styles. I mean, everyone has.
Well,
interpretation.
basically, what you're saying, where hardcore wrestling does not exist, is the only time that you're worth your weight in spit is Shakespeare.
Right.
And that's not the case. There is a market for everything.
Right.
Hardcore wrestling has existed even before ECW. ECW was just one of the first companies that quadrupled down on it and did every match hardcore.
But I think that hardcore wrestling puts wrestling in a bad light. That's my only concern.
I think in a way it does, but like I said, if you are novice to a certain art style, you get interested in it.
Right. Okay.
And I think with hardcore wrestling, it piques that animalistic interest in what is this? And I think everybody knows a wrestling fan somewhere. It's like, oh, you like this? Well, watch this. Maybe this is kind of more your speed. It's like, wow, this is really crazy. How do you watch this? I don't watch that. I watch this. It opens up that discussion.
Right. Okay. And I do think that there's a place for it. I just don't know how to counter your arguments, because I think both of us made some pretty good points, and whatever we didn't disagree on, I think we can say, there's a place for it. Like, there's this argument here for it.
Yes. But obviously, if hardcore wrestling was something that was just going to be dead and buried, CZW, Juggalo, Championship Wrestling, and House of Hardcore wouldn't exist with huge crowds.
Right. And I'm just saying that it doesn't give the industry a good look. It doesn't look good for the, if you want to be a wrestling promotion, it's kind of like a restaurant. You have McDonald's. I mean, McDonald's has a place for it, but it ain't very good.
Right.
And it kind of.
Well, no, that's another good analogy.
Right.
It's hardcore wrestling is fast food compared to fine dining.
Right. Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
It's like there is a place for it. There are people, and if you like your hardcore wrestling, hell, like I said, I enjoy some hardcore wrestling every now and then.
And I don't. I actually like the art of wrestling. You kind of got me hooked on New Japan. Even New Japan does some spots, but I think hardcore works if it's done as a spot.
Or if it's done as like a blow off to a huge match, and that's what I advocated. Is hardcore wrestling did save the industry.
Right.
Nobody can dispute that, and if you do, you can fight me, because I'm sorry. WWE and WCW, they followed ECW. It wasn't the other way around.
Right, and see, that's the other point I was trying to make too, was that it was no longer. I don't think that they are very good at setting trends anymore like they used to.
No, not at all. Remember, it's based on culture.
Right.
And with the culture now, where we have a much more understanding about CTE and stuff and feelings,
right.
Now you can make a fucking promotion called Feelings Championship Wrestling. It'll be the most popular thing because all they do is sit there and jerk each other off and go into their safe spaces and cuddle a kitten.
Tumblr Championship Wrestling?
Yes. Triggered Championship Wrestling, where you get a
TCW.
where you get a fucking trigger warning every goddamn show.
Right.
Where there's inclusion.
I kind of want to start a promotion like that.
That'd be interesting. Anyway, but my thing was, overall, hardcore wrestling was good for the industry. That is the question in my mind.
And in my mind, hardcore wrestling was not good for the industry. Maybe not necessarily because of what happened before, but because of its repercussions that still do exist today. And it exists today amongst the promoters, the fans, and the people who are not fans.
Right, and I think there have been fans that have been desensitized to a particular thing of violence.
Yeah,
I understand that.
Yeah,
but guess what? Those are fringe fans.
Right.
And I think we're starting to see the healing process in people's heads of hardcore wrestling being a little bit better.
Right.
Or not being in the limelight right now.
Right, because, of course, WWE tried hardcore wrestling again back in the mid-2000s, and then it quickly fell out of style.
When did they do that?
ECW's second
go
at
right.
it.
Well, I mean, ECW...
that could be a whole episode unto itself as to how much of a disaster that was.
Right. I think Mr. McMahon just pulled the gun too quickly because of the success of
One Night Stand.
The One Night Stand, and that is where it needs to belong at this point.
Right.
Like I said, I think nostalgia shows are fine.
Right.
And
your pay-per-views like Extreme Rules, I mean, there's a place for it.
There was a big blow-off match where these two have had like multiple matches for pay-per-views, and it's like, oh, do you want to do this in like a cage or something?
Right.
Go ahead.
You know what I do like though is I do like the fact that there is not as much blood as there used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not having people just caked in blood.
Well, they don't nick each other anymore.
Right. They don't nick each other.
When they start to bleed, you know that it was just either a mistimed spot or it adds that allure to it, and I think it's good.
But I don't like blood. I don't think blood is a good element to use. It's very...
I can even disagree. I can disagree with you on that because blood is very...
It's very carnal.
It's carnal, but sometimes it could be a very powerful storyline tool if done correctly.
Yeah.
Well, because that's what they did back in the NWA and
that's what they did even with AEW. Like, but I still cringe when I see like.
I mean, at least now
spots where people are like.
At least now it's not like a deliberate headshot in the face and they nix each other and it's obvious. It's Cody flying out of the ring, a little mistimed.
Right.
He hits his head. He gets cut. It makes him better.
Right.
Becky Lynch got her nose broken by Nia Jax, punch in the face. She was a little overzealous. Becky Lynch got a concussion, but it added to the allure of Becky Lynch. It made her look so much more of a badass.
Right.
Because overall, they doubled down on it as a tool.
Right. So, take of it what you will. I think we're about done with the conversation, though. But next week's show. Let's talk about next week's show.
So we're covering NXT TakeOver in your house,
which should be a good show. We will do predictions on that on Friday, and then per usual, we will do the watch party, and we're gonna do we'll be doing the show after that. Yes. On Sunday, and then we are also doing a discussion on shoot wrestling.
Yes,
because of course, this is a point in time.
It's almost a cookie cutter discussion on this, where we went to hardcore wrestling to something to another art form of professional wrestling, and that's shoot wrestling.
Right, and so of course, we're just trying to catch up on all the
discussions
around some of the topics that came up on
Dark Side of the Ring.
But let us know what you want us to cover as well.
Right.
There are a couple of series that both Tiger Height and I are looking at doing.
And if you become a $5 patron, we will actually take yours into a much greater consideration based on that. But you got to join. It's patreon.com/MajesticP. Link will be in the description wherever the hell you're watching it. It doesn't matter.
But anyways, of course, like and subscribe.
Follow us on all of our social medias and share it with your friends. And as always, be
majestic.
You're about to listen to the Pro Wrestling Zone podcast, a Majestic production property. One of the quickest rising professional wrestling podcasts on the market today, and the most entertaining podcast in the history of existence. Please note, before diving into the show, that this is for entertainment purposes only, so myself and Peanut Gallery engage in exaggerations, dirty or offensive jokes, and satirical comments. If you are a triggered little snowflake who gets professionally offended, this is not the podcast for you. If you do enjoy our work, we ask that you contribute to our Patreon page at patreon.com/majesticp. Contributors get access to the Discord, vote on what topic we cover, and enjoy exclusive content such as pay-per-view watch parties. Here's a sample of that from NXT TakeOver Portland. What about the other company that Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly went from?
Oh,
ROH? The one that they were signed exclusively to.
Oh, Ring of Honor?
Oh, no. Oh, that's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, my God. I felt that in my hand. If this is something you believe you would enjoy, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/majesticp and become a patron. This ensures that we continue to entertain you for years to come. Without further ado, sit back and enjoy the show.